This is the meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. Ms. Edwards, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Blanton, Chair Bullock,
Here.
Madison Edwards here, Dr. Elliott, Dr. Fleming,
Present.
Dr. Graham,
Here.
Vice Chair Griffin,
Here.
Ms. Hoskins,
Here.
Ms. Jenkins,
Here.
Ms. Jones, Dr. Locklear, Ms. Patton, Ms. Patton.
I'm present.
Okay, sorry, just want to make sure. Dr. Penfield,
Present.
Mr. Smith,
Present.
Superintendent Truitt, Dr. Weddington,
Here.
Ms. Wisner,
Present.
and Dr. Winter. Okay, and we do have quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome commission members, advisors, staff, online visitors, and online listeners to the March 14th, 2024 monthly meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. This Standards Commission develops and recommends to the State Board of Education rules related to all aspects of educator preparation, licensure, continuing education, and professional standards of North Carolina educators. I am Ann Bullock, Chair of the Professional Educator Preparations and Standards Commission, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, on the quote, SBE meetings, unquote, link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the e-board agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of all of us. Commission members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this commission. Does any member of the commission know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual conflict or apparent conflict of interest, please bring this matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in the discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Commission members, you've had the opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda for the March 14, 2024 meeting?
Move to approve. This is Randy.
Thank you, Randy. Second, we need a second.
Second, Hank.
Thank you, Hank. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Agenda approved. The minutes from our previous commission meeting on December 14th, 2023 have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? And who made the motion to approve them? I'm sorry, just for the record.
I did. Bill Griffin.
Thank you, Bill. And the second was, I think it was Madison.
Alexandra Hoskins.
Oh, sorry, Alexander. Yes, thank you. So, and all those in favor of approving the minutes, please do so by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The link for the March State Board of Education meeting has been sent to you prior to this meeting. The recording is bookmarked at the presentations of the Educator Standards and Practices ES&P Committee, which is the committee that handles the work of Pepsi. Any questions or anything about those from anyone? Okay. All right, so we have, does someone have a question or is that just?
Dr. Bullock, there's someone named Anonymous that just joined. Maybe we should find out who that is.
Okay. Hello, Anonymous. Could you tell us who you are? Kim, is there a phone number?
No, I'm assuming it says Anonymous because it started out in the middle. ANO ***** US.
It looks like it's an anonymous, but it's got a phone like it's a phone number.
Oh, okay, I don't see the phone number. Let's see if I can see it this way. I don't actually see. Oh, it does show an actual phone device icon, but I don't see an actual phone number.
How would you like to proceed?
That's up to you, Dr. Bullock. I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Logged on. Who is logged on via phone?
There's only one person according to, is anyone on here logged on along with their phone as well?
We only got one phone person. Madison Edwards may be on a device, but it doesn't.
Well, and it says her name. It says her name. Oh, so it looks like that person left.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're
All right,
welcome.
we will proceed. All right, so today we have two guests. We have Mr. Robert Filter, and I apologize if I'm not saying your names correct, Robert and Suzanne. Southwest Regional Coordinator for CTE Regional Services, and Miss Suzanne Lujan, Sandhills Regional Coordinator for CTE Regional Services, will present policy amendment, for CTED 004 and license 003. And they have multiple things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is eligibility criteria for specific CTE licensure, criteria required for a continuing professional license for specific CTE licenses, and technical edits. So that's kind of the first part, if I'm correct, Robert.
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman Bullock.
Yes,
Appreciate
take it
that.
away.
And as she indicated, Suzanne Lujan and I are here to present this. So the first update has to do with the eligibility criteria for the specific licenses. And the first license with some proposed changes is the 721 Health Science non-RN license. And what we're looking is to, in the license name and degree level column, add a diploma program. And as such, that would allow in the next category or the next item on there, related degrees, allow the diploma program for the licensed practical nurse along with advanced emergency medical technician to qualify those candidates to be eligible for that 721 health science license. And then as well, we'd like to add medical assisting and kinesiology as related degree options. And those are requested to be added because of the number of requests that we have specifically for those. In the documents, it lists examples, but those are asked frequently enough that we'd like to specifically list those in the documentation. And then for the emergency medical care, just from a specific situation where it is more referenced now from a degree perspective as emergency medical science. So we'd like to change that emergency medical care to emergency medical science. And then as well, we would like to then add the related work experience associated with those added degrees. So licensed practical nurse, along with the advanced emergency medical technician, medical assistant, and then exercise physiologist. adding those work experience to that column. And then the last two things would be to change the number of years of experience. It currently has 2 years of experience, and we'd like to further specify that the 2 years of work experience would be for those with a bachelor's or associate's degree, and then add 4 years of experience required with a diploma program certificate. And then lastly, again, just from a specific reference and what is proper naming convention, update paramedical state license to paramedic state credential. So those are the eligibility criteria for 721 health science non-RN license. Are there any questions? All right, we'll move on to the next items. The public safety, update the eligibility criteria. The program area consultant, the CTE program area consultant for public safety had requested that military experience be added because of the nature of what they do in the military. And so to make those veterans eligible to be able to teach the public safety courses. So to add that experience. And then to align more with the state fire marshal's actual terminology, we would remove the 2 from the NC Office of State Fire Marshal Qualified Firefighter 2 instructor, and it would read just firefighter instructor. You'll also notice on that, and I'll reference this later on a further slide, that the firefighter is updated to be 1 word as opposed to 2. And then for the 830 Curriculum and Instruction Management Coordinator, to be consistent, we recently in the past have removed the within the certain number of years of experience for the required years of experience. And so we would like to remove the within the past 8 years from that requirement of 5 years within the past 8 to read just 5 years of related work experience. All right, so for the next item would be updates to the criteria required for a continuing license for specific licenses. And the first has to do with the 74026 trade and industrial construction. And so for this, we'd like to add to the credential test or other criteria required for continuing column in the section 3.0 words. We'd like to add the words for craft professionals that aligns more specifically to what the requirement is. So that would be after the NCCER instructor certified training program. It would be then added for craft professionals added to that. Again, that more aligns to what we're looking at. And then for the next item, the 747 Career Development Coordinator. So there are currently 3 options, and option 1 that you see here basically is the combine. I'm going to call it the combine, and I'll explain options 1 and options 2, because option 1 currently has had the course that was offered by DPI that included both of these, and it has recently been split out. So the first portion of that is the National Career Development Association facilitating career development course. And then the additional requirement is the NCDPI new CDC induction. And then again, in the existing one, the second option was an NC Works course, also approved by the National Career Development Association, along with the NCDPI new CDC induction. And so since whichever method you use, and to allow for additional options for those trying to attain the Career Development Coordinator certification or license, we would just state the National Career Development Association facilitating career development course, and the NCDPI new CDC inductions would just be one option, because that would satisfy both of those requirements anyway. And then the option 2 there is identical to what it currently is in licensure, but it just becomes option 2 instead of option 3, because the other two were combined. And then for the Career Development Facilitator 749 license, and again, those had the same two options as a Career Development Coordinator. So again, we would just combine that into that one option for that license. Any questions? All right. And then for the specific technical edits, so the first one, we would like to add the word minimum to the column heading license name degree level. So it would read license name and minimum degree level. There's occasionally confusion where it would mention bachelor's degree, and if someone had a master's degree, it would be allowable, but sometimes it was confusing. So if it states minimum, there wouldn't be any confusion that you could have an associate, a bachelor's degree or a master's degree if it's specifically stated that. So we figured that would clear that up. And then we would like to add the words or equivalent to all licenses that currently have the high school diploma to read high school diploma or equivalent. Currently implementation, and it is used as such, but that would make it clear for anybody reviewing the documents to specifically say or equivalent. And again, as I referenced earlier, to change all references of firefighter, 2 words, to firefighter as 1 word. And then for the add-on for the T&I construction license, we would like to add the clarifying words specifically for craft professionals. And if you have an add-on, it's going to require 4 craft professionals and then requires 2 years of documented work experience related to that craft. I'm going to use carpentry as an example. So related to carpentry that will be taught, or the option of earning the NCCR module credentials that align to the standards for that course that would be taught. So it'd be those options, and we just add that clarifying wording that is part of what is in implementation now and is used, but that would add the clarifying wording. And the last 2 just have to do with typographical errors. The first, in the Career Development Facilitator, it has a TBD there, and it does not specify the specific license number. So we would specify 749. That is the license number for the Career Development Facilitator. And then lastly, for the technical edits, for the T&I Digital Media 74098, there's a typo where it has a P for Adobe as opposed to the appropriate B, so we'd update that. And the ADP reference should say ACP, and there's a few extra commas in there, and we would just remove those. Questions on any of those? And that's the conclusion of the CTE D004 updates. And then the last item that we would bring would be for LICN 003.
Hey, Robert.
Yes, go ahead.
Can we just stop before we do
Yes,
this?
absolutely, absolutely.
If you don't mind, just because it's a
I was
lot.
I was trying to hesitate in case there was questions, so I'm fine.
I'm sorry, I was muted, so you couldn't hear me. So all right, so for these first, I think it's 4 slides, I could be wrong on
Right,
the number.
correct, yes, that's correct.
Am I correct in saying that some of this is edits, right? Just cleaning up the language in the policies.
Right,
Some
correct.
of this is expanding the type of individuals that could become teachers through CTE for these different programs, and updating names of careers related to those different nursing, firefighter, things like that. So,
Teacher, yeah, correct.
all right. Is there anything else you would say at the 10,000 foot if you had to describe it in 3 sentences?
No, and we, as we're talking, and I apologize for not referencing earlier, one of these came from requests from directors, requests from program area consultants. They have been reviewed by the regional coordinators, taken for the advisory board of directors, and then actually Suzanne presented this at our CTE directors conference here recently, a couple weeks ago, just for any input or clarification, et cetera. And so it basically has approval from the majority of the stakeholders for these updates.
That's terrific to know. So, questions from the commission?
And I'll add, it was also presented to a few of the leadership in licensure that process the licenses, and to two of their director and a coordinator for input as well.
That's great. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for that. Questions on this part? Okay, so could I have a motion to approve the policy amendments to CTED 004 that focus on eligibility criteria for specific CTE licenses, criteria required for a continuing professional license for specific CTE licenses, and technical edits to be sent to the State Board of Education in April? Someone like to make that in motion?
Anthony Graham, move to approve.
Thank you, Anthony. Do we have a second?
Second, this is Alexandra Hoskins.
Thank you, Alexandra. Any other further discussion or clarification needed? Kim, a point of order here. For the policy vote, do we need to call the roll to vote?
I don't believe so.
Okay, all right, thank you. So all those in favor of approving this motion, please verify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Robert and Suzanne, you may go to the second part, and this is amendments to the license 023, which is talking about the cut score for the marketing content test, just to give everybody a context of this. The CTE folks have been busy at work cleaning their stuff up and getting things straight, so we appreciate them.
Thank you, Chairman Bullock. Yeah, so the request to change the required score for the praxis, and the request is to change the required score from 169 to 156. So our rationale has to do with North Carolina currently having the highest qualifying score in the nation of states that require marketing praxis by at least 3 points, and it is currently 13 points higher than the average. 156 is the median qualifying score for marketing, and all other program areas in North Carolina, their qualifying score is the national median score. The examples there provided: family and consumer science at 153, technology at 159, business at 154, and marketing currently at 156, and North Carolina requires 169, the median marketing. And so districts have expressed concern about losing teachers due to the inability to pass the praxis after multiple attempts. Marketing teachers are coming out of the business world and have to take the course in order to clear their license, and they're having difficulty to pass the exam. The cost of multiple retakes creates a hardship for teachers with limited resources. Neighboring states either do not require a praxis or have a lower qualifying score than North Carolina. And in reviewing, we found that North Carolina's pass rate for marketing, the most recent that we could find anyway, for the marketing praxis was only 47%. And so our proposal would be to update the required score from 169 to 156 for anyone that has taken the test or takes the test as we move forward.
Robert, is this, well, I noticed that on the other tests, I like this part B, 1, 2, 3, 4, that the other areas use the median score. So this just went a different direction, it seems.
Yeah, correct. And I can't provide any history specific to why, but obviously it is certainly not in alignment with what the other ones are.
And the neighboring states, do you know if are they kind of closer to the median, so to say? Do you know?
I don't know the specifics. I know we checked to see, and they were all either the same or lower, and or did not require a praxis.
Okay, all right.
And then actually, Suzanne and I were talking earlier today, we were talking about, the surrounding states, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, those. So those are the ones that we looked at.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, so could I have do I have a motion to approve the policy amendments to license 003 that changes the cut score of the marketing content test 5561 from 169 to 156 to be sent to the State Board of Education in April?
I make a motion as stated by Dr. Bullock.
Thank you, Craig.
Second, Aaron Fleming.
Thank you, Aaron. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving this motion, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you, Robert and Suzanne, for all of that. That was a lot to put together, and thank you for your diligence and for keeping current in CTE to move things forward to the state board. So hopefully that will be successful for you. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yes. So next we're going to talk about the principal preparation and principal standards, which is some task force work that's happening in the state. And I believe we have Dr. Tomberlin is going to present to us today. And this is to provide context for something that will be coming forth to Pepsi and over the next couple months. We may have another presentation in April, we'll see, but we'll definitely, I'm guessing, have a presentation in May. But we thought it would be helpful, or I thought it would be helpful, Bill and I did, if you were all provided some context of how where we are now and what this work is trying to do and how it's moving forward. So Dr. Tomberlin, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. Can you folks hear me okay?
It's a little low. We could see it, but your voice is a little low, I think. Maybe me.
Is that better?
Yes.
Well, the reverb. It's okay. I can switch to a. Are these mics over here live?
Yes.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you, Tom.
Good, yes. I'm sorry I didn't do a mic check before we started. So I am Tom Tomberlin, Senior Director of Educator Preparation, Licensure, and Performance here at DPI. Generally, Dr. Seiberg would be presenting this information, but I am filling in his absence. So if I miss anything, please let me know. So this presentation covers three major topics, and those are principal standards work, recent law impacting principal preparation, and the ongoing work to address changes in the law. So the first is the principal standards work, and this is to provide you with a brief overview. This is slide 4. There we go. Brief overview of the history of this work. So this work began in 2018 on the impetus for reviewing the North Carolina standards for principals, stemmed from an update of the PEASL standards, combined with the fact that the principal standards had not been substantially reviewed in over a decade. So this, to address this issue, Pepsi put together a principal standards committee to work on the possible review of the standards. So that work occurred in 2018-19, and that group worked to review and update the standards. In 2021, the results of that initial effort led to stakeholder feedback. And since 2021, the revised version has been in small field testing to gather information on its usability. That field testing does not rise to the level of validity and reliability testing. It was just implemented to gather feedback from practitioners on the utility of the revised standards. So the next slide shows you the composition of the Principal Standards Committee members. You can see there who all participated in that work. So the work of that committee focused on analyzing the existing standards for gaps in relation to the PEASL or NELP standards. That committee decided to revise existing standards in lieu of adopting the PEASL standard, just the national standards as is. They reviewed feedback from LEAs, EPPs on the PEASL and NELP standards, and they developed descriptions of practice that are focused on competencies. So this slide represents an example of how they approach that work on a given standard. You can see here, this is from Strategic Leadership or Standard 1, and how they, for those of you who are familiar with the instrument, there are the classifications, the performance classifications of does not meet, no, I'm sorry. Below standard, and for some reason that needs improvement, proficient, accomplished, and distinguished. Those kind of categorical buckets were not as helpful to folks evaluating the performance as some of the included language that kind of gets at the disposition or the action of the principal in relation to these standards. So does the principal have an understanding of the standard, whether or not he or she actually applies that in practice, and then application or applying, that's the next level, and then impacting. So their adherence to the standard creates impact on the schools and that they're serving, and then systematizing. Do they extend beyond just the application of that, and that becomes that standard, or the embodiment of that standard becomes part of the culture of that school. So districts, the feedback in general was the districts found these types of labels helpful in understanding the performance of the principals. So the question becomes, why did the group stop? Why did they did this work kind of go on hiatus? Well, it was recognized that stakeholder group that was put together wasn't as necessarily representative of the state as a whole that we wanted to see, and so this new committee that's working on the revision of the standards is addressing that very issue, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So next, we're going to move to recent law impacting principal preparation. So the main law here that is of interest is Session Law 2023-125, and that introduced new requirements for our principal prep programs. Some of the changes to this law were designed to address the disconnect between what was happening operationally in the field and what was the intent of the law. Next, the establishment of this recent law requires some effort on the part of the department and stakeholders to come into compliance. So one of the first things it covered was defining the principal prep program, and the statute does create this. Generally, we think of principal prep as part of, inclusive of an EPP, an educator preparation program, but this law went a step further and designated administrator prep programs as distinguished from general EPPs. And so an APP prepares, trains, and recommends candidates for administrator licenses. That program leads to a Master of School Administration, an MSA, or it leads to a Master of Education or Educational Leadership unless the candidate already holds a master's or doctoral degree in an educated-related field. So what this does in plain language is something that the previous law did not allow, and that is licensure only for principal candidates. So if you had a master's degree in curriculum instruction and you wanted to do principal licensure, you didn't have to do a full MSA program. You could take licensure only route and add principal licensure because you already had a master's degree in an education-related field. That practice was not allowable under the previous law, and this new law does provide for that opportunity. And also the candidate meets the APP meets one of the following criteria: is accredited by a programmatic accrediting agency recognized by the Secretary of State pursuant to federal law. Specifically, we would think of this as CHIA, the Council of Higher, I'm going to mess this up, Dr. Bullock, I think you probably know what CHIA is better than I do. Oh, no, it's not to grow hair. It is not a, an
It's the
infomercial.
Council for Higher Education Accreditation.
Yes. Thank you very much. Or the program was approved by the State Board of Education as a school administration prep program prior to April 1st, 2023. So I think one thing we have to note here is that approval of an APP from this moment forward would require accreditation by a CHIA-approved accrediting agency. So some of the other updates, that all candidates in an internship have to complete an internship, and that internship is at a minimum 500 hours in duration. So part of the work of PEPC will be making a recommendation to the State Board of Education of what that minimum number should be. If it's above 500. Certainly couldn't be below 500, but it could be above 500. And it also requires the development of portfolios that meet criteria adopted by the state board and provide evidence that candidates are applying their training to actual school needs and challenges. So this codifies what was intended back in 2008 when there was some principal reform work around licensure, and that work resulted in the creation of portfolios that were meant to be the basis of licensure as opposed to an assessment. Unfortunately, for whatever reason back in 2008, those policy recommendations that were made to the Board of Education were not codified in statute. And so that has created the situation that we're in right now. So this does allow for those portfolios and indicates them as the basis for licensure, or one of the bases for licensure. There are some other requirements in here that I will not take the time to read to you. You are certainly encouraged to read through them, but they are generally just kind of what happens now. They're not anything substantive. They're not any substantive changes to the current statutes. So there are some other areas of law, so certain bills that were introduced and ratified that have some impact on our current situation. So in 2021, Session Law 2021-170, the General Assembly, at the request of NCDPI, created a waiver for principals who had not met the requirements as listed in statute at that time. This waiver was the deadline for this waiver was August 31st, 2024, and it waived the requirements that might have otherwise caused a principal license to be invalidated. So those are the exams, specifically the exam that was required in statute, and two, the year-long internship, the classroom teaching experience required by general statute, the requirement that an individual hold specifically a master's degree in education administration, or what we would call an MSA, and then the second level of differentiation. And the second level of differentiation that's referenced means that a candidate was not able to hold a principal, an administrator license, unless there was an underlying teaching license that had been converted to a continuing professional license. And I want to point out that the teaching license was very specific. So that the old law precluded any instructional support personnel, a school counselor, a school social worker, a school psychologist, from pursuing an administrative degree unless he or she had an underlying teaching degree, teaching license, and had at least 3 years of experience on that license. So this waiver was actually extended in 2022, and that deadline was extended out to August 31st, 2024. So what the result of this is that candidates for principal licensure, or candidates enrolled in an MSA program or a licensure-only program for administrators who meet that or precede that deadline will appreciate the benefits of the waiver. But those that come after August 31st, 2024 will not. And so what this means, again in plain language, if an EPP or an APP has a candidate that has completed at least one course towards their program by August 31st, 2024, that candidate would fall under the waiver rules and therefore would not be required to take an assessment or to have an underlying teaching license in order to hold the administrative license. Anyone who does not have that at least one course completed by August 31st, 2024 must abide by the new principal laws. And so those previous slides lay out what those requirements are in statute. And particularly what's of interest here is there will be some kind of assessment associated with issuing a principal licensure, and what that assessment is a matter of recommendation for PEPC to the State Board of Education. So number 3, work to address changes in law. So currently that we have a task force for principal standards, licensure, and evaluation. And this task force is designed to continue the work that was begun by the Principal Standards Committee. We have had 3, but now maybe 4 meetings to date. We've had the 3, and there you can see the dates for this task force to review the revisions to the principal standards made by the Principal Standards Committee and update those or give feedback where appropriate. So what this work will entail is we are very much focused on maintaining the work done by the Principal Standards Committee, and what we are doing is engaged in examining those revisions, making sure they're still applicable, and providing some context and clarification where necessary. We are not throwing that work away and starting over again. So it is a continuation of that work that was begun years ago. They also are considering the portfolio for licensure. And this group is considering a portfolio-based assessment for licensure and how to streamline the instrument from North Carolina. So how do we, what's available out there in terms of a portfolio-based assessment that we can use for establishing principal licensure. The internship, they are addressing or coming together to make a recommendation to you, PEPC, for what the minimal hourly requirement should be for a year-long internship, and the evaluation instrument itself. So based on the standards in the portfolio, what's determined there, they are thinking about how the principal evaluation process would need to evolve in order to align with both the portfolio-based assessment and the standards. And that is a brief overview of the timeline of where we are in this work, Chair Bullock, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So at this time, we'll have any clarifying, anything that you want to extend on, you may have heard about this work either on the EBP side or the PSU side. So does anyone have any questions for Tom? Tom, I have a question, or I have something I think might be helpful. Can you talk about, if you have this information at this point, the correlation between the standards and the choice of the performance-based assessment?
Yes. So in the work that's being done, there are, and we're not sure at this point kind of what the result will be, but there will be at least 7 standards for principals. There might be an 8th that we would put forward as a recommendation to PEP-C. So part of the work is to understanding first what the standards are, and then looking at a potential performance-based, portfolio-based assessment that would align well with that. So that is a tall order. There are a limited number of kind of nationally developed portfolio-based assessments for administrators. We have looked at, I think, the entire population of those assessments, and the task force is focused on one in particular. None of them, I have to say, none of them cover the full breadth of standards that we in North Carolina have, or in the states that are using those assessments. But what is possible, so the portfolio-based assessment in itself is designed to focus on some key indicators that would give us sufficient confidence that this principal is competent to be licensed, and we can, none of them are meant to cover the entire spectrum. So, but what North Carolina would have the opportunity to do is to potentially modify those performance tasks and add some additional language that might help bolster the alignment between the particular instrument we're looking at right now and the future state of the principal standards. So it is a work in progress, and our expectation is when this comes to PEP-C for a recommendation, we will have a better understanding of what kind of changes we could make to the assessment, and maintain its validity and reliability, but that would better support some of the standards that we feel are important in capturing in a principal assessment.
Yeah, Tom, I have questions about the portfolio, the methodology, but I think my questions would be premature at this point in time. But I will be very keenly interested in the methodology for selection and then what that looks like moving forward.
So the selection of the portfolio?
The assessment, yeah, right.
Or for the assessment. So
right.
I want to be clear, there's 2 different things going here. There is the portfolio that from what we know across the state, every APP program in the state has a portfolio as part of their preparation requirement. The intent here is not for the state to direct APPs of what that portfolio should look like, but rather it's to identify an assessment that would evaluate the principal's selection of elements from that portfolio as a demonstration or as evidence of their competency along certain principal standards. So it's kind of like we're identifying the test at the state level, and every APP's portfolio, the work of the APPs would be to ensuring that their portfolios support the candidate in passing that assessment. So you're right, this is less about the individual APP's portfolios and more about ensuring that we're selecting a test that can be comprehensive and flexible enough to capture the different idiosyncrasies of each APP's portfolio process.
I do, Tom, think the language going between performance-based assessment and portfolio could be confusing to the public, right? Because it's like one thing that leads to another piece. So I think that us being clear about that might be helpful.
Yes, so if I misspoke, so this is very specifically what we are asked to identify in the statute is a portfolio-based assessment. So
a reliable and we were saying it needs to be reliable and valid.
Yes. And so if I misspoke and said performance-based assessment, I apologize, because I don't want folks to get the idea that this would be kind of the principal comes in and models some kind of immediate prompt. The idea is the principal would be completing the assessment based on all the artifacts and all the resources they have within their existing portfolio.
And or coursework.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Does that help? Does that help, Anthony? I'm looking at you because does that help other people understand the difference between the two?
Yeah, I'm good. I understood it. I'm still curious on the methodology.
Yeah. There would also be, there would probably be a cost as well, correct, Tom?
Yes, any assessment that we choose would have a cost.
Yeah. Other questions from the group?
And this is Randy. Going in a different direction, and Tom, I just want to make sure I'm understanding things right. So what's happening now is that we're defining APPs differently than EPPs.
The statute has created this entity called an APP. Administrative Preparation Program.
And so then does that necessarily implies then that policies that apply to EPPs will no longer apply to APPs?
I think insofar as there are aspects of principal preparation and licensure that are not applicable to EPPs and vice versa, I think you're right that there is a distinction. But where things are general requirements of any preparation program, I would say equally apply to both EPPs and APPs.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Which begs a question for me. I'm trying to play this out in my head. You mentioned earlier, Tom, the language of CHIA-approved accreditation agency, not CAPE, but CHIA-approved. So does that imply that our APP programs could have differing CHIA-accredited programs? And would the standards be different? Well, the standards would be different across those accreditation agencies. I'm just trying to figure out the language. I get the broadness of it, but I'm trying to figure out what it looks like in execution.
Yes, the way I read this, Dr. Graham, is that whatever accrediting agency a program chooses to utilize, they would have to be CHIA approved, which is the approval arm of the U.S. Department of Education. So now, I mean, we can talk specifically about, there's CAPE and then there's AQUAP. And so we would not distinguish between either one of those. Those two accrediting agencies might have differences in their methodology for accrediting, but the state would not distinguish between those because they're both CHIA approved.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? I have a couple more, but I just want to make sure that people get their questions answered. So, Tom, this is all to you, or I know Dr. Jordan is on here as well. So, if a member of the group if a member of the public wanted to give feedback on this or had further questions, is there someone on the task force? Should they contact DPI? Who is the task force? Are the task force members public and listed, or what should they go through, you or Dr. Jordan, or what should they do?
I do believe the task force members are public, but I'm going to check with Dr. Jordan on that. I don't know if he was having trouble being heard. He was the anonymous caller, I think, from earlier, and I don't know if he can be heard now.
He is totally not anonymous in my world, so that's pretty hilarious. So,
but my sense is yes, the members of the task force are public, and I think certainly someone interested in getting feedback. I think the best course of action is to contact those members of the task force with which an individual might have some affinity. So we have principals on there, we have superintendents on there, we have EPP folks on there, and so I think the best way would be for an individual to reach out to somebody on that task force of the same affinity group. But in the absence of that, folks could certainly contact Dr. Seiberg or myself and ask that their feedback be related to the task force. We would certainly honor that request.
and so here's your follow-up question, Tom. So the task force membership, people may or may not know who's on there. So where would they find that list? Or could we send that out through our PSU and EPP?
Yes, we could certainly share that with Pepsi, but we're not going to have it. I'm trying to think about how would the public listening in know where to go. I don't have that list with me today, but we could certainly share that, and we can talk to. I'll circle with Dr. Jordan about how maybe that list can be posted publicly somewhere.
Okay, all right. And also I say the PSUs, right? The public schools, the LEAs as well. So, I mean, we do have, I do have a couple of communication routes that go to LEAs and EPPs. So maybe that could also be an option.
Yes.
As well. Yeah. Okay. Other things. So this provides a context. Hopefully it's been helpful for everyone before we get to, before this is brought before the commission. People can also reach out to members of Pepsi, but at this point, the work is still with the task force and with DPI. So we just thought it would be helpful if today that there's context provided. It was also briefly discussed in the EPP monthly meeting. It could also possibly be discussed in, I believe it's the HR meeting that happens. I don't know if that would be helpful. Would our PSU partners think that might be a helpful place as well, or no?
Yes. So we could definitely, we would definitely cover this with our HR webinar. And
Great.
I think Dr. Cyberg has already presented this particular presentation. Oh, Dr. Evans presented this particular presentation in the EPP webinar.
Yes, on Friday, yes. So if you were listening and you wanted to hear it again, you could also listen to it as well there. There were some questions that came out of that, and I'm sure there'll be some questions that come out of the HR as well, but just we want, full coverage and people to have as much information as possible before this decision's made, because it is quite a quick timeline, and the task force is working diligently and quickly. Other questions about this? All right,
So,
thank you, Tom.
Dr. Bullock, I'm sorry. There's one point that I wanted to there is one requirement that's associated with this, and this is to recommend, the State Board of Education is required to make a recommendation on a portfolio-based assessment by June 15th, 2024. And
Yeah, so we'll probably see this in May. We're hoping that we'll have to see this in May,
that is correct, yes.
by May. Yeah, and I think it'll probably be May.
All right.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tom. That's very helpful. All right, so that is what we have for today. So thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for the discussions. I remind commission members that our next monthly meeting will be held in a hybrid manner, in person at the 7th floor of State Board of Education boardroom, as well as virtually. And that will begin at 1 o'clock on Thursday, April 11th. So we'll look forward to seeing those that can join us. And at that time, we will have recommendations related to our subcommittee work that has been happening instead of our regular monthly meetings. So it's a super important meeting, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. We have now completed our meeting, and unless there's additional business at this time, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Bill.
Thank you, Bill. A second?
Madison, I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Madison. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.